This course is tailored for engineering students with fundamental knowledge in chemical and mechanical engineering. It focuses on design strategies to remove air pollutants. Throughout this series, students will learn about the basic design of equipment used to remove pollutants from the air. If you find this course helpful, please leave your constructive feedback to help us improve. Thank you for watching, and we appreciate your support. In this episode, Part 1 of the Introduction to Air Pollution Control, we will discuss airborne pollutants and their health effects. Looking for a reference book to complement this video series? The premier reference book for this course is Air Pollution Control, a Design Approach. The content of this video series draws extensively from this exceptional resource. I highly recommend purchasing it to enhance your understanding and to serve as a valuable addition to your engineering library. Upon completing this course, you will be equipped to clearly explain the primary sources of air pollutants, identify the underlying causes of air pollution, compare and analyze various methods for mitigating air pollution, calculate the dimensions required for air pollution control equipment, estimate the initial purchasing costs of air pollution control equipment, detail the operational costs associated with the functioning of this equipment. Let's start with the types of airborne pollutants. Before we dive into air pollution control, it's crucial to first consider preventing pollutants at the source. However, sometimes prevention isn't possible, such as with natural events like volcanic eruptions or necessary activities like using woodworking machinery that produces sawdust. In cases where prevention isn't feasible, we need to think about designing equipment to reduce pollutants. But before we explore those solutions, let's get familiar with the pollutants we'll be discussing in this course as airborne pollutant. Airborne pollutants, also known as air pollutants, are substances that contaminate the air and can pose serious health and environmental risks. These pollutants can be classified into two main types: particulate matter and gaseous pollutants. Gases pollutants. These include gases such as sulfur dioxide, SO2, nitrogen oxide, NOx, carbon monoxide, CO, O3, and volatile organic compounds, VOCs. These gases can have various sources, including industrial processes, vehicle emissions, and chemical reactions occurring in the atmosphere. In addition, bad-smelling gases, smog, and fog, each contributing differently to air quality issues. Bad-smelling gases. These are often sulfur or nitrogen compounds, such as hydrogen sulfide, H2S, and ammonia, NH3, which are not only unpleasant but can also be harmful to health and the environment. Smog. This is a form of air pollution that's a combination of smoke and fog, primarily made up of ground-level ozone and particulates. Smog is especially prevalent in urban areas and can severely reduce air quality and visibility, as well as pose serious health risks. Fog. While typically a natural phenomenon consisting of tiny water droplets suspended in the air, fog can interact with pollutants and chemicals to form what is known as photochemical smog, especially when mixed with industrial pollutants. All these are considered gaseous pollutants because they involve substances in gaseous form, or minute particles suspended in the atmosphere, which can adversely affect both health and the environment. Particulate matter. These are tiny particles or droplets in the air that can be inhaled and cause health issues. Particulate matter is categorized by size, such as PM10, particles with a diameter of 10 micrometers or less, and PM2.5, particles with a diameter of 2.5 micrometers or less. Both types of pollutants can originate from a variety of sources, including industrial facilities, vehicle exhaust, natural events like wildfires and volcanic activity, and residential activities such as heating and cooking. These pollutants can affect air quality and human health, contributing to respiratory problems, cardiovascular diseases, and other health issues, as well as environmental impacts like acid rain and climate change. Primary criteria: air pollutants are those released directly into the atmosphere from specific sources and are regulated due to their direct impact on health and the environment. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, has established National Ambient Air Quality Standards, NAAQS, for these pollutants to protect public health. The primary criteria air pollutants include carbon monoxide, a colorless, odorless gas produced by the incomplete combustion of fossil fuels, prevalent in emissions from vehicles and industrial processes. Lead, a metal emitted through industrial processes and previously from leaded gasoline. It can cause neurological damage, especially in children. Nitrogen dioxide, part of a group of gases called nitrogen oxides. It is a reddish-brown gas with a sharp odor, produced from vehicle exhausts and power plants. Ozone, O3, while it is a secondary pollutant at ground level, stratospheric ozone, also measured as a criterion pollutant, shields the Earth from harmful ultraviolet rays. Particulate matter, PM. This includes both PM10 coarse particles and PM2.5 fine particles. These particles are emitted from a variety of sources, including vehicles, factories, and natural sources such as dust and wildfires. Sulfur dioxide, SO2, a gas produced by volcanic eruptions and industrial processes including the burning of coal and oil at power plants and the refining of oil. Volatile organic compounds, VOCs, are organic chemicals that have a high vapor pressure at room temperature. This high vapor pressure results from their low boiling points, which causes large numbers of molecules to evaporate or sublimate from the liquid or solid form of the compound into the air. VOCs are emitted by a wide array of products, numbering in the thousands. These pollutants are closely monitored and regulated because of their direct emission into the atmosphere and their potential to cause immediate harm to human health, such as respiratory and cardiovascular diseases, as well as environmental damage. Secondary criteria air pollutants are those that are not emitted directly into the air as primary pollutants, but form as a result of reactions between primary pollutants and natural elements in the atmosphere. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, monitors these pollutants because of their potential to harm human health and the environment. They include ground-level ozone, O3. This is not emitted directly. Rather, it forms when nitrogen oxides, NOx, and volatile organic compounds, VOCs, react in the presence of sunlight. Ozone at ground level is a major component of smog and can cause or exacerbate respiratory problems and other health issues. Particulate matter, PM. While some particulate matter is emitted directly from sources like combustion, secondary particulate matter forms in the atmosphere from the chemical reactions of gases such as sulfur dioxide, SO2, and nitrogen oxides. These particles can be harmful when inhaled, penetrating deep into the lungs, and even entering the bloodstream. Sulfuric acid mist. This secondary pollutant forms when sulfur dioxide reacts with other compounds in the atmosphere. It contributes to the formation of fine particulate matter and can have adverse health effects. Nitrogen dioxide, NO2. While NO2 is also a primary pollutant, additional NO2 can form in the atmosphere from the oxidation of nitric oxide, NO, together with ozone and peroxyacetyl nitrate. These pollutants are regulated under the U.S. Clean Air Act because of their indirect formation through chemical reactions in the air and their substantial effects on human health and the environment. It is really important for us to grasp how each primary criterion pollutant affects our health. By understanding the specific impacts, we can truly appreciate the value of air pollution control equipment. This knowledge not only highlights the significance of managing air quality, but also encourages us to support and use these essential tools to keep our air clean and safe for everyone. Let me outline the various health impacts of carbon monoxide exposure on humans as general symptoms and neurological impact and severe outcome. General symptoms. Carbon monoxide is a colorless, odorless gas that can cause serious health issues when inhaled, because it prevents the blood from carrying oxygen. Early symptoms of CO poisoning include headache, often described as dull and persistent, nausea and vomiting. These symptoms can mimic those of viral illnesses, making early diagnosis tricky. Dizziness, caused by reduced oxygen levels to the brain. Fatigue, a common early symptom due to a decrease in oxygenated blood. Weakness, general bodily weakness, especially in the arms and legs. Neurological impact. As CO exposure increases, it can affect the nervous system severely. Confusion and disorientation. impaired mental state resulting from brain hypoxia, lack of oxygen, visual disturbances including blurred vision or temporary loss of sight, syncope, caused by insufficient oxygen to the brain, seizures. In severe cases due to significant brain hypoxia, severe outcomes, prolonged exposure to high levels of carbon monoxide can be life-threatening. High doses of carbon monoxide can cause death, often due to cardiac arrest or respiratory failure. Particulate lead in the atmosphere is a significant environmental and public health concern, especially because it can be inhaled or ingested after it settles on surfaces. Here are the primary health impacts associated with exposure to particulate lead. Neurological effects. Lead is a potent neurotoxin, especially harmful to children. It can affect brain development, resulting in reduced IQ, behavioral changes, such as increased aggressiveness, and decreased ability to pay attention. In adults, lead exposure can cause memory loss and decreased ability to concentrate. Cardiovascular problems. For adults, lead exposure is linked to increased blood pressure and hypertension. Chronic exposure to lead can also increase the risk of heart disease. Kidney damage. Lead can accumulate in the kidneys, leading to renal dysfunction and diseases. This effect is more pronounced with chronic exposure. Reproductive issues. Both men and women can experience reproductive problems due to lead exposure, including reduced fertility and harm to the developing fetus, such as low birth weight and premature birth. Developmental effects in children. Besides neurological damage, lead exposure in children can lead to physical and mental developmental delays. These effects can be long-lasting and severe, often irreversible. Immune system. Lead exposure can impair the immune system, making individuals more susceptible to infections. Anemia. Lead interferes with the body's ability to produce hemoglobin, the oxygen-carrying component of red blood cells, leading to anemia. Given the severity of these health impacts, strict regulations have been implemented to limit lead emissions into the environment. These include removing lead from gasoline, restricting its use in household paints, plumbing systems, and reducing industrial emissions. Public health initiatives also focus on lead removal from homes and the environment, especially in areas with old plumbing and paint. Nitrogen dioxide, NO2, is a significant air pollutant with various health effects, primarily affecting the respiratory system but also having broader impacts. Here's how NO2 can affect health. Respiratory problems. NO2 can irritate the airways in the human respiratory system. Exposure to elevated levels can decrease lung function and increase the risk of respiratory conditions. It exacerbates symptoms in people with asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, increased susceptibility to infections. By damaging the lining of the respiratory tract, NO2 can make individuals more susceptible to lung infections, including bronchitis. In children, this can result in increased episodes of wheezing and coughing. Gravitation of asthma. NO2 is known to exacerbate asthma. It can increase the frequency of asthma attacks and the severity of symptoms, leading to greater use of medication and more frequent visits to healthcare providers. Development of asthma in children. There is evidence suggesting that long-term exposure to NO2 can contribute to the development of asthma in children who have not previously exhibited symptoms. Cardiovascular effects. Although primarily a respiratory irritant, NO2 can also contribute to cardiovascular problems. Long-term exposure is associated with increased risk of cardiovascular morbidity and mortality. Overall mortality. High levels of NO2 are associated with increased overall mortality, especially due to respiratory and cardiovascular diseases. Reducing exposure to NO2, particularly in urban areas where emissions from vehicles and industrial activities are high, is crucial for public health. Efforts include improving emission standards, enhancing public transport, and promoting cleaner alternative energy sources. Ozone, particularly ground-level ozone, is a potent air pollutant with several adverse health effects. It forms when pollutants emitted by cars, power plants, industrial boilers, refineries, chemical plants, and other sources chemically react in the presence of sunlight. Here's how ozone can affect health. Respiratory issues. Ozone is a powerful respiratory irritant. It can cause coughing, throat irritation, and airway inflammation. It also reduces lung function, making it difficult for individuals to breathe as deeply or vigorously as they normally would, exacerbates asthma and other lung conditions. Ozone can trigger asthma attacks, increase the frequency of asthma medical visits, and exacerbate conditions like chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, and bronchitis. Increases susceptibility to infections. Ozone exposure can make the lungs more susceptible to infection by damaging the cells that line the respiratory tract and impairing the body's ability to clear respiratory infections. Long-term health effects. Chronic exposure to high levels of ozone is linked to the development of asthma in children. There is also emerging evidence that long-term exposure may lead to the development of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, and other chronic respiratory diseases. Cardiovascular effects. There is evidence that ozone exposure can lead to vascular inflammation, altered heart function, and increased risk of heart attacks and other cardiovascular events. Mortality. Several studies link high ozone levels to increased mortality rates, especially from respiratory and cardiovascular causes. Minimizing exposure to ozone, especially during days when air quality alerts are issued due to high ozone levels, is crucial for protecting public health. Vulnerable populations, such as children, the elderly, and individuals with pre-existing respiratory and heart conditions, should take particular care. Particulate matter, PM, especially fine particles known as PM 2.5, particles that are 2.5 micrometers in diameter and smaller, can play a significant role in respiratory health issues including asthma. Here's how PM can contribute to asthma. Irritation and inflammation. Fine particles can penetrate deep into the lungs, causing irritation and inflammation of the airways. This inflammation can exacerbate asthma symptoms, such as wheezing, coughing, and shortness of breath. Increased sensitivity. Exposure to particulate matter can increase sensitivity to asthma triggers. Individuals who are already sensitive to allergens may find that their reactions are more severe when particulate levels are high. Reduced lung function. Chronic exposure to PM can lead to a decrease in lung function over time, which can make asthma symptoms worse and more difficult to control. Immune system response. Particulate matter can alter immune system responses, potentially leading to an increased risk of asthma attacks. The particles can carry allergens deeper into the lungs, triggering an immune response. Development of asthma. There is evidence to suggest that prolonged exposure to high levels of particulate matter can contribute to the development of asthma in children and adults who have not previously exhibited symptoms. Particulate matter, PM, can also have significant cardiovascular effects, contributing to heart health issues. Here's how exposure to particulate matter, particularly fine particles like PM 2.5, can impact cardiovascular health. Increased blood pressure. Short-term exposure to PM can lead to temporary increases in blood pressure. Over time, chronic exposure can lead to sustained hypertension, a major risk factor for cardiovascular disease. Inflammation and oxidative stress. Particles can induce inflammation and oxidative stress in cardiovascular tissues. These responses can contribute to the development and progression of atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, which can lead to heart attacks or strokes. Changes in heart rate variability. Exposure to particulate matter is associated with changes in heart rate variability, HRV, which is an indicator of how well the heart responds to autonomic nervous system signals. Reduced HRV is linked to increased risk of heart events. Thrombosis, blood clots, PM, can enhance blood clotting tendencies, which can lead to thrombosis. Blood clots in the coronary or cerebral arteries can trigger heart attacks and strokes respectively. Endothelial dysfunction. The endothelium, which lines the blood vessels, can be damaged by particles, impairing its ability to regulate blood flow and blood vessel dilation. This dysfunction is a key step in the pathogenesis of cardiovascular diseases, arrhythmias, and acute coronary events. There is evidence linking particulate exposure to arrhythmias and acute coronary events like heart attacks, particularly in individuals already at risk or with pre-existing heart conditions. Those most at risk include people with heart or lung diseases, children, and the elderly. Even healthy individuals can experience temporary symptoms. Sulfur oxides, SOx, primarily consisting of sulfur dioxide, SO2, are significant air pollutants with various adverse effects on human health, primarily impacting the respiratory system, but also having broader systemic effects. Here's how sulfur oxides can affect health. Respiratory irritation. SO2 can irritate the respiratory system, leading to throat irritation, coughing, shortness of breath, and a tight feeling around the chest. These symptoms can be more pronounced during physical activity. Exacerbation of asthma and chronic lung diseases. Exposure to sulfur oxides significantly aggravates asthma and other chronic lung conditions such as chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, and bronchitis. It can increase the frequency and severity of asthma attacks. Decreased lung function. SO2 exposure can lead to reductions in lung function, making it difficult for the lungs to work efficiently. This effect is particularly harmful to children and the elderly. Increased respiratory symptoms. Even short-term exposure to SO2 can increase respiratory symptoms including wheezing, chest tightness, and shortness of breath, particularly in individuals with pre-existing lung diseases. Increased risk of hospital admissions. Higher levels of sulfur oxides in the air are associated with increased hospital admissions for respiratory and cardiac conditions. Potential cardiovascular effects. While the primary effects of sulfur oxides are on the respiratory system, there is evidence suggesting that long-term exposure can also affect the cardiovascular system, contributing to heart disease. Protective measures against SOx exposure include monitoring air quality levels, particularly in areas near industrial sites where sulfur oxides are commonly emitted, and taking precautions such as staying indoors and using air purifiers during episodes of high pollution. Volatile organic compounds, VOCs, are a broad category of chemicals that easily evaporate at room temperature and are found in many everyday products and industrial processes. VOCs include a variety of chemicals, some of which may have short and long-term adverse health effects. Here's an overview of the impact of VOCs on health. Irritation. VOCs can cause irritation of the eyes, nose, and throat. Frequent symptoms include headaches, dizziness, and visual disorders. Some individuals report a worsening of asthma symptoms due to VOC exposure. Organ damage. Chronic exposure to certain VOCs, such as benzene, can lead to damage to the liver, kidney, and central nervous system. Cancer. Some VOCs are known carcinogens. For example, benzene can cause leukemia, and formaldehyde is linked to nasopharyngeal cancer and leukemia. Neurological effects. Prolonged exposure to some VOCs can result in neurological damage and impairment, affecting cognitive functions and coordination. Respiratory problems. VOCs contribute to the formation of ground-level ozone and fine particulate matter, which in turn can exacerbate respiratory conditions such as asthma and chronic bronchitis. Developmental effects. Exposure to certain VOCs during pregnancy is linked to adverse reproductive and developmental effects, such as congenital disabilities and reduced fetal growth. This was a quick overview of how primary criteria pollutants impact our health. If you need more detailed information, I highly recommend checking out the EPA website, where you'll find a wealth of valuable resources. Thanks for tuning in. If you found this section both enlightening and educational, don't be shy, drop a comment, and hit that subscribe button. Stick around for part 2 of our air pollution course intro. It only gets better from here.